Hey everyone, this is Chris and welcome to Unwanted Tutorials. Unwanted Tutorials is a loose collection of how-to, hands-on, decidedly irreverent videos in which I aim to enable you to create engaging content using DCS's hellish creation tools. Last time we looked at using waypoint actions to add plane guard helicopters to naval groups. Today we'll look a little closer and what we'll see is ugly. So, if you've come here to hear the praise of DCS, then boy, have you come to the wrong show. So, caveat emptor, content creator, you have been warned. To recap last episode, central to plane guard helicopters is setting up a follow waypoint action. A follow waypoint action has a couple of attributes. They describe which group to follow and a position inside the group where the following unit should remain in relation to the group. Setting up which group to follow is easy. Simply choose the group's name from a pop-up. And here comes the first wrinkle. In DCS, it's not at all defined what following a group really means. What is a group's location? This becomes very, very important when you have to define a point relative to a group's location, like you have to do here. If you can't define that, then everything else becomes moot. Imagine a group of 3 vessels. Where is the group's location? Its geometric center? The position of one of its units? Mathematically, this is well defined. How about DCS? Answering this question was already overlooked when Eagle Dynamics critically undercooked the waypoint concept, and their stupidity now hits us doubly. And yeah, this is precisely what happens if your developers are cheap, underqualified non-talents. The detrimental effects snowball and become an avalanche of pure horse manure. I believe it to be one of the main reasons that DCS's core is so close to collapse. Lack of design coupled with cheap talent and low effort. So, we must give a location where the helicopter is to take up station, relative to a group. Luckily, we get a hint. When we choose a group in the Waypoint Actions Group pop-up menu, a triangle is overlaid on the group's lead vessel and a line extends to that triangle. So, the working assumption is that the follow location for the following helicopter is to be distance, elevation and interval away from that unit's location. So we put down a location where we want the helicopter to be. This is represented by the dashed circle. Next, we measure the interval, here 55, and distance, here 0, from the lead unit to the circle's center. When in doubt, use DCS's ruler function to measure distances. Always measure horizontal and vertical differences separately. The horizontal value is the interval. The vertical difference becomes distance. And yes, this confuses the hell out of anyone used to working with coordinate systems, for the simple reason that DCS works with non-standard coordinates, another major design flaw. Once we have transferred the values, there is no visible feedback in Mission Editor. Apparently, it's entirely too much to expect Eagle Dynamics to put some quality of life in here. Although trivial to implement, we do not see where the follow location, as defined by distance and interval, would end up. Neither is there any UI element that we can click and drag to set the location. We have to measure, guess, and run the sim multiple times until we get it right. It is trivial to provide a much better experience, and so I'll toot my own horn later and give a quick glimpse of how this could be done. Later. For the time being, we work with what we got. The plane guard location is always relative to the lead unit, and we now fixed its location at distance 0 and interval 55 from the lead unit. Except, what happens if the lead unit is lost? None of the low watt bulbs at ED bothered to document that, and I believe that none of them ever thought of this possibility. Cheap, one-shot missions don't deal with that kind of problems, and neither, it seems, do cheap developers at Eagle Dynamics. And so I designed a mission to find out what actually happens in this case. Here we see a naval group consisting of 4 ships. The Tilde leads, has the 1, the Ticonderoga to the south is Unit 2, Stennis up north is Unit 3, and a Tarawa in the east brings up the rear. Each of them has a plane guard helicopter assigned. When we start the mission, we see the helicopters move to their designated spots next to each ship. If I now remove the lead unit, the Tilde, what happens? The former number 2, the Tycho, becomes lead, and the other ships arrange roughly behind the new lead to more or less keep formation. A valiant effort. But what becomes of the helicopters that are performing plane guard? Well, they keep their relative locations, but now relative to their new lead unit. The result is a partly messed up, partly okay combination, with the new plane guard location sometimes making sense, otherwise not. All of this could have easily been avoided if the developers had paused for a second, used their brains, and made the UI so that units follow units instead of groups. Well, this is what happens when your developers perform shitty jobs and you don't have enough QA to spot even the most fundamental design flaws. So, what do we take home from this? To avoid issues like this, if you use plane guard helicopters, make the lead unit immortal. That way, DCS at least won't screw you over on simple eye candy. Unfortunately, we have merely scratched the surface. Consider our original example. The naval unit that we want to follow is heading due north, 0 degrees. To determine interval and distance to the intended follow location, we measure the distance vertically on the map as 0, same as center of unit, and interval to be 55 meters off starboard to the center line. But what would those values be if the vessel is heading west, as in the image on the right? What are the values for distance and interval when the followed ship has turned? Well, that's the truly ugly part. They are the same, 0 for distance and 55 for interval. Why? Because we set the follow location in the followed group's local coordinate system. And that coordinate system is always set at 0 degrees. So, if you use the measuring tool to determine distance from a rotated group, make sure to apply the correct sine and cosine values to arrive at the result as provided by this handy table I put together for you and that I'm sure you remember from middle school. A different method is to start the group at a heading of north, measure all values, and then have the group turn to their correct heading. And it gets worse. Remember that all follow offsets are defined relative to the lead unit in the lead unit's coordinate system. Let's get back to the 4-unit naval group I showed before, led by the Tilde and the Stennis and Tarawa being units 3 and 4. To place just 2 plane guard helicopters, one each for the Tarawa and Stennis, you'll have to measure distances between Tilde, apply rotation, and then solve for distance and interval. Once you have done that, enter the values into Mission Editor, run the sim, and see if the results match what you expect. A complete waste of time, since this is exactly what applications are built for, to free you of stupid, simple tedium. Unfortunately, nobody at ED agrees, or we would have had a real graphic interface for group following and placing plane guard 15 years ago. But hey, Seafrag, you might say, why are you being so hard on ED? This may be more difficult than you think. It's not. How do I know? Because I created a small script to do all this. The most difficult part? getting a middle school math book from my godson. This is trivial stuff, and it makes everyone at Eagle Dynamics look shitty when they deliver crap like this. Some time ago, I worked on a small tool for mission creators that I call DML. It's freely available to anyone, and its goal is to make the task of mission creation easier. I realized that the people working at ED are really bad at creating games, or UI, or applications in general, or anything except perhaps cockpits. And I wanted to help. DML is available to anyone who is interested, and there's even a manual. Yes, a real manual. Anyway, this is how you would add plane guard helicopters with DML. First, add DML to your mission. I already did that. It's simple, and there's already a video for that. You need to add the scripts DCS Common, CFX Zones, CFX MX, and Plane Guard. I created a naval group consisting of 4 vessels that is steaming west. The naval units are a Tilde supply vessel as lead, a CG Ticonderoga number 2, the CVN 74 Stennis as number 3, and an LHA-1 Tarava as number 4. I use mouse wheel and right click and drag to zoom in until I can see all 4 models. So far, nothing special. DML uses a forgotten DCS feature to work its magic: trigger zone attributes. When I built DML, I wasn't trying to be obtuse. Using trigger zone attributes merely allowed me to bypass 99% of DCS's and mission editors' dysfunctional crap. Mind you, DML isn't great, I'm the first to admit that. Anyone with good talent can do better. It still leaps and bounds better than anything the low ability developers at Eagle Dynamics were able to put together. I'm not that good. ED's talent is that trashy. So let's add 2 plane guard helicopters to this the DML way. First, I click into the trigger zone icon on the left. It's the small circle with a tiny X inside it. Then I click slightly below, to the south, and a bit forward of the Stennis. A large yellow circle appears. On the right, a new panel has opened with many strange controls. Third from the top is a control named Radius. I change its value to 10 for purely aesthetic reasons. This shrinks the trigger zone. I zoom in on the Stennis and then, by clicking and dragging, position the center of the trigger zone where I want the plane guard to be. Look for the tiny spreadsheet and click on the Add button just below it. A new line appears with property_1 in the name column. Change the word property_1 to plane guard. And that's basically it. This will put a CH-53 with unlimited fuel on plane guard duty at the center of the trigger zone. DML will do the rest. Attach it to the correct unit in the correct group, calculate all offsets for you, set unlimited fuel. Basically, it just works. Unlike anything in DCS. Okay, less talking, more chalking. Click on the trigger zone, press Ctrl Charlie to copy the trigger zone to the clipboard. Zoom and pan until you have centered the view on the Tarava. Then move the mouse to a point slightly aft, east and north of the Tarava. Press Ctrl Victor to place a copy of the first trigger zone. Click and drag the trigger zone until you think that the center of the trigger zone is a cool place for the plane guard. And that's it. Save and run the mission. When the mission starts, allow the 2 helicopters a few seconds to move into their positions and settle. Now let's briefly inspect the plane guard that's hovering next to the Stennis. And damn, that stallion looks like a fine machine. Since I am rotorhead, I hope that someday there will be a DCS stallion. Note how it is exactly hovering where we place the trigger zone center. You can go back anytime and visually reposition the zone in Mission Editor. There is no manual calculation involved. And that is how Mission Editor should work. If there was any UX talent at ED, that is. Alright, let's hop over to the other stallion, chasing the Tarava. And yeah, I can't help myself, just looking at these majestic machines makes it worth for me. That's why I think that Plane Guard adds so much immersion to a mission. It's unfathomable to me why it's so difficult in Mission Editor. And that is what I meant when I say that Eagle Dynamics know jack and give less when it comes to application design, UI and game experience. It's not to say that I'm a coding god. Maybe I am. But even then, something that I do on the side in my spare time should not be leagues above what the entirety of ED's paid staff can muster up. It's an embarrassment what your people do, Eagle Dynamics, and you should be ashamed. If ED had good designers, Mission Editor wouldn't be crap, DCS wouldn't be a crap game, and we'd have tons of great missions today. Alas, DCS is dying because we have no good content and DCS is lacking a good foundation to build on. My hopes are with you, dear content creator, that we can create enough good content to give DCS enough breathing room. Some comments on DML. I spent a couple of years crafting it to what it is now. During those years, my exasperation with low quality and obvious lack of skill in ED's team grew to a point when, in mid-2025, I decided that my efforts were wasted, ED's focus and strategy seemed scattered, their work uninspired, and their abilities were significantly below what I deem sufficient. I truly hope that I am mistaken. Should DCS be able to arrest its free fall and become a viable game again, I'm happy to return to DML. If you are interested, you can find links in this episode's blurb. And enough about DML. This series focuses on how you create missions mano a mano. I may occasionally mention DML, but this series' focus should remain firmly on Mission Editor. So, when you create a mission that includes naval units, think about attaching a plane guard helicopter to the lead unit, or make it hover somewhere else between the ships. It looks cool and increases immersion. To protect against DCS bugs, always make the carrier the number one unit and think about making that unit immortal. But how do you do that? Well, stay tuned. Until then, take care.